Eat properly, or your body will forget how to live. The words were simple, almost careless, yet the moment they left her lips, the man's glass stopped inches before touching his mouth. Red wine trembled inside crystal, frozen in mid-air as if time itself had been commanded to kneel. Around them, the low hum of the restaurant collapsed into a suffocating silence. A fork slipped from someone's hand and struck porcelain with a sharp, echoing crack. No one moved. No one dared to breathe. The quiet customer in the corner booth slowly lifted his eyes, and for the first time that night, the air grew cold enough to raise goosebumps along every exposed inch of skin. Emily Carter stood there, still holding the edge of his plate, her brows slightly knit with concern rather than fear. She had seen customers like him before. Men who sat too still, who forgot to eat, who drowned themselves in wine instead of food. Men who looked like they were carrying something too heavy to name. So she had done what she always did. She adjusted the plate. She softened her voice. She reminded him, gently, like she would remind anyone. You need to eat. She did not know that every eye in the room had turned toward her. She did not see the way the other servers had stepped back, nor the way the manager had gone pale near the register. She only saw a man who had not taken a single bite. Before continuing, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe because tomorrow's story is one you cannot miss. The man's gaze remained locked on her, unblinking, ancient, and far too aware. There was something wrong with the way he looked at her, as if he was not seeing her for the first time, but remembering her from somewhere impossibly distant. His fingers tightened slightly around the stem of the glass, yet he did not drink. He did not speak. The silence stretched, heavy and unnatural, until even the soft jazz playing overhead seemed to fade into nothing. Then, slowly, deliberately, he lowered the glass back onto the table without taking a sip. The movement alone sent a ripple through the room. One of the men seated near the bar stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. Another whispered something under his breath, voice shaking. Emily blinked, confused now, her hand still resting lightly near the plate she had straightened. Sir, she said, quieter this time, unsure why her heartbeat had suddenly begun to pound in her chest. Are you feeling all right? The man leaned back slightly in his seat, his posture still composed, still controlled, yet something had shifted. Something ancient had been disturbed. His voice, when it finally came, was low, measured, and carried a weight that did not belong to any ordinary man. Say that again. The request was not loud. It did not need to be. It carried authority that pressed against the walls, against the floor, against every person in the room. Emily hesitated for a fraction of a second, then repeated, softer now, you should eat properly. This time, the reaction was immediate. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. Not anger, not irritation, something far more dangerous. Recognition. And for the first time in centuries, the Vampire King felt something dangerously close to a heartbeat. Emily did not move right away. Something in the way he had said those words pressed against her chest like a weight she could not explain. Around her, the restaurant remained frozen, not in time but in fear. She could feel it now, the shift in the air, the way people were watching without looking, the way even the lights seemed dimmer near his table. Her fingers slowly pulled back from the edge of the plate, and for the first time that night, uncertainty flickered across her face. I just meant you should not skip meals, she said, her voice softer, careful now, as if speaking too loudly might break something fragile and invisible. It is not good for your health. The man studied her in silence. His gaze did not wander. It did not blink. It held her there, as if weighing every word she had ever spoken in her life. Emily swallowed, suddenly aware of how small she felt standing beside him. Not because of his size, but because of something else, something deeper, something that made her instincts whisper that she had stepped into a place she did not belong. Behind the counter, the manager finally moved. His shoes scraped sharply against the floor as he rushed forward, his face pale, his hands already trembling. Emily, he hissed under his breath, grabbing her arm just above the elbow. Step away from the table. Now. The urgency in his voice startled her more than anything else. She allowed herself to be pulled back one step, then another, her eyes never fully leaving the quiet customer. I did not do anything wrong, she whispered, confused, her heart still beating too fast. I was just helping. The manager leaned closer, his grip tightening. "You do not understand," he said, his voice barely audible. "That is not someone you talk to like that." Emily frowned, her confusion deepening. "Like what?" she asked, but before he could answer, the temperature in the room dropped again. It was subtle, but undeniable. A cold that did not belong to air conditioning, a cold that felt alive. The manager's hand instantly released her arm, as if he had been burned. Slowly, deliberately, the man at the table stood. The movement was smooth, controlled, but carried a presence that forced every person in the room to lower their gaze. Chairs shifted. Conversations died completely. Even the sound of breathing seemed to vanish. Emily felt it then, fully, the weight of him. Not just a man. Something more. Something old. He did not look at anyone else. He did not acknowledge the manager. His attention remained fixed on her as he stepped forward, closing the distance with measured precision. Each step echoed louder than it should have, as if the floor itself recognized him. Emily's instincts told her to step back, to apologize, to leave, but her feet refused to move. She stood there, caught between fear and something she could not name. He stopped less than 1 foot away from her. Up close, the details were impossible to ignore. Skin too pale, too perfect. Eyes that held a depth that did not belong to any normal human life. And yet, there was something else there too. Something fractured. Something searching. Health? He repeated quietly, as if testing the word. His voice was lower now, less commanding, but somehow more dangerous. "You believe that is what I need." Emily hesitated, then nodded once, instinctively honest despite everything around her. "Everyone needs to eat," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "It is basic." A faint shift crossed his expression. Not quite a smile. Not quite anything she could define. Behind him, one of the men near the bar took a slow step backward, his face drained of color. Another turned away completely, unable to watch. The entire room understood something Emily did not. The man in front of her had not been spoken to like this in a very long time. "Basic," he repeated again, softer, almost to himself. His hand lifted slightly, not toward her, but toward the table behind him, where the untouched plate still sat. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with deliberate control, he reached for the fork. The simple act sent a visible ripple through the room. Emily blinked, unsure why such a small movement felt so significant. He cut a small piece of food, precise and careful, as if remembering something he had forgotten. Then he brought it to his mouth. The moment he took a bite, a collective breath released across the restaurant, quiet but undeniable. Emily exhaled without realizing she had been holding her breath too. The man chewed slowly, thoughtfully, his eyes never leaving hers. And in that silent exchange, something shifted again. Not in the room, not in the air, but in him. Even the coldest kings kneel for kindness. The first bite should have meant nothing. It was food, simple and ordinary, something every person in the room had done without thought. But the moment Lucien Voss swallowed, the air itself seemed to shift in a way that no human could fully understand. Emily felt it as a subtle pressure against her chest, like standing too close to a passing train, powerful and unseen. Around the restaurant, the reaction was immediate but restrained. No one spoke. No one dared. Yet the change rippled outward in silence. A man near the window lowered his head completely, his shoulders stiff with tension. Another guest, a woman dressed in black, slowly stepped backward until she reached the wall, her eyes never leaving the man who now stood before a human waitress with a fork in his hand. Emily did not understand any of it. She only saw that he had listened, that he had actually taken her advice. And somehow, that made her feel both relieved and deeply unsettled at the same time. "See," she said quietly, almost instinctively, a small, nervous smile touching her lips. "That was not so hard." The words left her mouth before she could stop them. The effect was immediate. Several people in the room flinched as if struck. The manager made a choking sound under his breath, his face draining of what little color remained. But Lucien did not react with anger. He did not raise his voice. He did not even move at first. Instead, he studied her again, more intensely this time, as if each word she spoke carved deeper into something buried within him. "No," he said finally, his voice calm but carrying a depth that seemed to echo beyond the walls. "It was not." The agreement was quiet, but it sent a visible shock through the room. Emily blinked, unsure why that response felt more dangerous than if he had shouted. She shifted her weight slightly, suddenly aware of how close he still stood. "Good," she said, softer now, her confidence fading just enough to show the edge of her uncertainty. "Then you should keep eating." Behind her, the manager took a step forward, clearly intending to stop her, but he froze when Lucian's gaze flicked briefly in his direction. It was not a glare. It was not even direct. But it was enough. The man stopped instantly, his mouth closing without a word. Control. Absolute and effortless. Emily felt it then, not through fear, but through instinct. This man was not just important. He was not just wealthy. There was something about him that bent the behavior of everyone around him without effort. Something that made people obey before they even realized they had made a choice. Lucian turned slightly, his attention shifting back to the table. The untouched plate waited where she had placed it. Slowly, deliberately, he sat down again. The movement was smooth, composed, yet it carried the weight of a decision far greater than simply returning to a meal. He picked up the fork once more. Another piece. Another bite. This time, the action came easier, as if a memory was guiding him. Emily watched, her confusion growing with every second. "There you go," she murmured, more to herself than to him, trying to settle the strange tension in her chest. "That is better." Across the room, a whisper finally broke free, barely audible but sharp with disbelief. "He is eating." The words spread without sound, carried in glances and subtle shifts, a silent communication passing between those who understood what Emily did not. Lucian paused again, the fork hovering just above the plate. His eyes lifted, meeting hers once more. This time there was something clearer in his expression. Not just recognition, not just curiosity, something heavier, something that carried the weight of years no human could measure. "Emily Carter," he said quietly. The sound of her full name in his voice sent a chill down her spine. She had never told him that. Not tonight. Not ever. Her breath caught. "How do you know my name?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, he did not answer. His gaze held hers, steady and unyielding, as if deciding how much truth she could survive. Then, slowly, he set the fork down beside the plate. "Because," he said, his voice lowering even further, "you have just done something no one has done in more than 300 years. The weight of that statement settled over her like a shadow. Emily stared at him, her heart beginning to race again, this time not from confusion, but from something colder, something deeper. "And what is that?" she asked, unable to stop herself. Lucian's expression did not change, but the air around them seemed to tighten, as if the world itself was listening. "You reminded me," he said, each word precise, deliberate, "that I was once human." The silence that followed was no longer just tension. It was revelation. And for the first time, Emily realized that the man in front of her was not simply a quiet customer. He was something far beyond her understanding. Even the coldest kings kneel for kindness. The words settled into Emily like cold water. "You reminded me that I was once human." She did not understand how to respond to that. Her mind searched for something ordinary, something safe, but nothing fit. The man in front of her did not belong to any category she knew how to handle. Not a difficult customer. Not a lonely one. Something else entirely. The silence stretched, heavy and watchful, until Emily forced herself to breathe again. "Everyone is human," she said finally, the sentence simple, instinctive, the way she had always believed the world worked. Her voice was quiet, but steady, or at least they start that way. The moment the words left her mouth, a visible reaction moved through the room. Not loud, not chaotic, but sharp. Several guests turned their heads away, as if she had crossed a line no one else would dare approach. The manager's hand lifted slightly, then dropped again, his courage failing before it could form. Emily felt the shift, but did not fully understand it. She only knew that something about what she had said mattered more than it should. Lucian did not answer immediately. His eyes remained fixed on her, darker now, deeper, as if her words had reached into a place that had been sealed for centuries. "That is a belief," he said slowly, "not a truth." His tone was calm, but there was something beneath it. Not anger, not cruelty, something closer to pain, buried so deep it had turned cold. Emily tilted her head slightly, studying him in a way that no one else in the room would have dared. "Maybe," she replied, her voice softer now. but sometimes beliefs matter more than truth. Another silence followed. This one different. Not heavy with tension, but charged with something fragile and uncertain. For a fraction of a second, Lucian's expression shifted again. A flicker. A memory. Gone almost as quickly as it appeared. Then the room intruded. A man near the bar took a step forward, his voice controlled but edged with urgency. "My lord," he said carefully, his head lowered. "This situation is inappropriate." The title landed like a stone dropped into still water. "My lord." The words echoed through Emily's mind, slow and delayed, as if her brain refused to process them at first. She blinked, her gaze flicking briefly toward the man who had spoken, then back to Lucian. "My lord," the man repeated, more firmly now. "She has overstepped." Emily felt it then. The shift in everything. The weight of the room. The fear that no one had been able to hide completely. Her chest tightened as realization began to form, piece by piece, each detail she had ignored now falling into place. The silence. The way people moved around him. The way her manager had panicked. The way no one else had spoken. She looked at him again, truly looked this time, and for the first time, she felt it. Not just presence. Power. Old, controlled, and absolute. "Overstepped," Lucian repeated, his voice quiet but carrying a sharp edge now. He did not raise his volume, yet the man who had spoken immediately lowered his head further, as if the word alone had struck him. "Explain." The command was simple. It did not need force. The man hesitated, just for a moment, then spoke again. "She addressed you without permission. She corrected you. She spoke as if you were equal." Each statement landed with increasing weight. Emily's stomach dropped slightly with every word. Equal. She had not thought about it that way. She had not thought about any of this that way. She had only seen a man who needed to eat. Lucian's gaze returned to her, slower this time, more deliberate. The room held its breath again, waiting for a reaction that could reshape everything. Emily felt her pulse in her throat, her instincts finally catching up with reality. This was the moment. The moment where she should apologize. Where she should step back. Where she should admit she had been wrong. But the words did not come. Instead, something else rose in her chest. Not defiance. Not arrogance. Something quieter. Something steady. "I was not trying to be equal," she said, her voice low but clear. "I was trying to help." The honesty in her words cut through the tension in a way nothing else had. Lucian did not look away. He did not interrupt. He simply watched her, as if weighing something far more important than the rules of the room. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the edge in his presence softened. "And if I did not want your help?" he asked, his voice quieter now, less like a command and more like a question that had not been asked in a very long time. Emily met his gaze without lowering hers. Her fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. "Then you would have told me," she said, "and I would have stopped." Another silence followed, this one deeper than the rest. Not filled with fear, not filled with tension, something else entirely. Recognition. Lucian turned his head slightly, his gaze shifting toward the man who had spoken earlier. The movement alone was enough. "Leave," he said. One word. Absolute. The man did not hesitate. He stepped back immediately, bowing his head before retreating without another sound. The rest of the room followed his example, distancing themselves without being told. In seconds, the space around Emily and Lucian widened, as if an invisible boundary had been drawn. Emily stood there, her heart still racing, her world quietly unraveling around her. And in front of her stood a man who was no longer just a quiet customer. He was something far more dangerous. And for reasons she did not yet understand, he had just chosen not to destroy her. Even the coldest kings kneel for kindness. The space around them did not return to normal. It did not fill with noise or movement the way a restaurant should. Instead, it settled into something quieter, something controlled, as if every person present was waiting for permission to exist again. Emily could feel it in the way the air pressed against her skin, in the way even the faint clink of glass from the far end of the room sounded distant and cautious. She stood where she was, unsure whether she was supposed to leave or stay, her hands now empty at her sides. Across from her, Lucian remained seated, his posture composed, his presence unchanged, yet there was a difference now. A shift so subtle that no human eye should have noticed, and yet Emily did. He was no longer observing her like a stranger. He was watching her like a question. Slowly, without breaking eye contact, he reached for the fork again. Another bite. Deliberate. Controlled. The act itself should have been ordinary, but the reaction it created was anything but. At the edge of the room, one of the men who had previously stepped back lowered himself into a chair with visible care, as if afraid that sudden movement might draw attention. Another guest lifted a glass but did not drink, his eyes flicking toward Lucian and then away again in quick succession. Emily noticed it all now. The patterns. The fear. The silent communication passing between people who understood a hierarchy she had never been part of. Her throat felt dry. "You really are important," she said before she could stop herself, the words slipping out in a tone that held more realization than accusation. The moment the sentence landed, she almost regretted it. But Lucian did not react with offense. He set the fork down once more, his fingers resting lightly against the table as he studied her again. "That is one way to describe it," he said, his voice even, unreadable. Emily hesitated, then took a small step back, not in retreat, but in an attempt to regain some sense of balance. "No one acts like that for someone who is just important," she said quietly. "They act like that for someone they are afraid of." The truth of it hung in the air between them. No one in the room moved. No one interrupted. It was as if every person present was listening, even if they pretended not to. Lucian's gaze did not waver. "And you?" he said after a moment. "Are you afraid?" The question was simple, but it carried weight far beyond its words. Emily opened her mouth, then closed it again, her thoughts catching up to the reality she was standing in. She should be afraid. Everything around her told her she should be. The silence, the reactions, the title that had been spoken. "My lord." It echoed in her mind again, louder this time. But when she looked at him, truly looked, she did not see what everyone else seemed to see. She saw something else. Something controlled. Something restrained. Something that had chosen not to harm her when it easily could have. She took a breath. "I think," she said slowly, choosing each word with care, "that if you wanted to hurt me, you already would have." The statement settled between them with quiet certainty. For a brief moment, something in Lucian's expression shifted again. Not visibly enough for anyone else to notice, but enough for her. "That is a dangerous conclusion," he said softly. Emily gave a small, uncertain shrug. "Maybe," she admitted. "But it is the only one that makes sense right now." Another silence followed, but this one was different from the others. It was no longer filled with fear or tension. It was filled with something quieter. Consideration. Lucian leaned back slightly in his chair, his posture relaxing by a fraction that would have gone unnoticed by anyone else. "You speak as if you have nothing to lose," he said. Emily let out a small breath, almost a laugh, though it held no humor. "I have plenty to lose," she replied. "Rent, bills, my job if I say the wrong thing to the wrong person." Her eyes flicked briefly toward the manager, who quickly looked away. Then back to Lucian. "But none of that matters if I stop being who I am." The honesty in her voice was unguarded, raw in a way that did not belong in a room like this. It did not belong near someone like him. And yet it did not falter. Lucian watched her for a long moment, his silence stretching, his gaze unreadable. Then, slowly, he reached for the glass of wine he had set aside earlier. The same glass that had frozen in his hand. The same moment that had changed everything. He lifted it again, this time without hesitation. But before he drank, he paused. His eyes remained on her. "Emily Carter," he said quietly, her name no longer a question, but something more deliberate now. "From this moment forward, you will not be dismissed from this place without my consent." The words landed with quiet finality. Across the room, several people stiffened instantly. The manager's face went pale again, his posture straightening as if struck by an invisible force. Emily stared at Lucian, her heart skipping once, then twice, the meaning of his statement settling in slowly. This was not protection. Not exactly. It was something else. Something that carried weight she did not yet understand. "That is not how jobs work," she said, her voice softer now, uncertain but still holding on to reason. Lucian's expression did not change. "It is now," he replied. The room did not question it. No one would. Because everyone there understood something Emily was only beginning to grasp. The rules had just changed. And she was the reason why. Even the coldest kings kneel for kindness. The words did not echo. They did not need to. They settled into the room with a quiet finality that no one dared question. From this moment forward, You will not be dismissed from this place without my consent. Emily felt the meaning of it before she fully understood it. It was not a suggestion. It was not protection in the way she knew it. It was something heavier. A claim without saying the word. Around them, the shift was immediate. The manager straightened so abruptly that his chair scraped loudly against the floor, the sound breaking the silence for less than a second before it was swallowed again. Of course, he said quickly, his voice tight, controlled, directed not at Emily, but at Lucian. She will remain on staff. Emily turned her head slightly, her brows drawing together. That is not what I agreed to, she said, her voice low but steady, though her heart had begun to beat harder again. The manager did not respond to her. He could not. His attention remained fixed on Lucian, waiting for approval, for dismissal, for anything that would tell him how to proceed. Lucian did not look at him. His gaze remained on Emily, unwavering, as if the rest of the room had already ceased to exist. You misunderstand, he said calmly. This was not a negotiation. The clarity in his tone sent a subtle ripple through the room. Emily felt it this time, fully. The way his words did not simply communicate, but enforced. She drew in a breath, holding it for a moment before letting it out slowly. I still have a say in my own life, she replied, the sentence quiet, but carrying more resolve than before. It was not defiance. It was not challenge. It was truth, the only kind she knew how to offer. For the first time since he had spoken, Lucian's head tilted slightly, a fraction of movement that suggested something unexpected. Not offense. Not anger. Consideration. Do you? He asked, his voice softer now, but no less powerful. The question was not mocking. It was not rhetorical. It was genuine in a way that made it more unsettling than anything else he had said. Emily opened her mouth to answer, but the words hesitated. She thought about her rent, overdue by 3 days. About the second job she had almost lost last week. About the landlord who had already warned her once. The truth was not as simple as she wanted it to be. I tried to, she said finally. The admission was small, but honest. Lucian watched her, the silence stretching again, but this time it felt different. Not like pressure, like observation, as if he was learning something. Then, slowly, he lifted the glass of wine again. The same glass that had frozen before. This time, there was no interruption, no pause. He took a measured sip. The simple act released something in the room. Not relief. Not exactly. But permission. Conversations did not resume, but the tension loosened by a fraction. Enough for people to breathe again. Enough for the illusion of normalcy to return, even if it was fragile. Emily noticed it immediately. The way shoulders lowered. The way someone dared to move a chair. The way the manager stepped back, though his eyes remained fixed on Lucian with careful attention. She looked back at him, the man who had just altered the atmosphere of an entire room with a single movement. You could have just said thank you, she said quietly, the words slipping out before she could filter them. A few people nearby froze again. The tension snapped back instantly, sharp and immediate. But Lucian did not react the way they expected. He set the glass down with controlled precision, his fingers releasing it without sound. Thank you, he said. The words were simple, clear, and utterly unexpected. Emily blinked, caught off guard. Oh, she said softly, the edge of surprise slipping into her voice. You are welcome. The exchange should have ended there. It should have returned to silence, to distance, to whatever invisible rules governed this place. But it did not. Lucian leaned forward slightly, his presence shifting again, not larger, not smaller, but more focused. You corrected me, he said. Emily frowned slightly. About eating, she replied. Yes. His gaze held hers. No one has done that in 300 years. The number settled heavily between them. 300 years. Emily's mind caught on it, stumbled over it, tried to make sense of it, and failed. That is not possible, she said quietly, though her voice lacked conviction now. Too many things tonight had already broken what she thought was possible. Lucian did not argue. He did not explain. And yet, he said simply. The room seemed to close in again, not physically, but in awareness. Emily became acutely conscious of where she stood, of who stood in front of her, of the invisible line she had crossed without knowing it existed. Why does that matter? She asked, her voice softer now, not out of fear, but out of genuine confusion. Lucian did not answer right away. His gaze shifted slightly, not away from her, but through her, as if seeing something beyond the present moment. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before, carrying something that did not belong to power or command. Something older. Because, he said slowly, people who remember that I should eat are the ones who remember who I used to be. The weight of that statement settled deep. Emily felt it, not in her mind, but somewhere else. Somewhere quieter. She did not know what to say to that. For the first time since this began, words failed her. And in that silence, something unseen tightened its hold on both of them. Even the coldest kings kneel for kindness. The silence after his words did not fade. It deepened, because now it carried meaning. People who remember that I should eat are the ones who remember who I used to be. Emily stood there, her thoughts caught between disbelief and something far more unsettling. 300 years. He had said it so casually, as if time worked differently for him. As if decades were nothing more than passing moments. Her instincts told her to laugh it off, to call it a strange joke, but nothing about this night felt like a joke anymore. Too many things had already slipped beyond explanation. I do not remember anything about you, she said quietly, her voice steady but careful. I have never seen you before tonight. The honesty in her words hung between them, unfiltered, unprotected. Around them, the room seemed to listen again, even in stillness. Lucian did not respond right away. His gaze held hers, searching, measuring, as if the truth of her words mattered in a way that went beyond simple curiosity. Then, slowly, he nodded once. I know, he said. The certainty in his voice was absolute. Not questioned, not doubted. And somehow, that made it more unsettling. Emily frowned slightly. Then why are you acting like I should? She asked, unable to stop herself now. The question was not disrespectful. It was confused, grounded in the only logic she had left. Lucian leaned back slightly, his posture composed, but his attention still locked onto her. Because, he said, his voice lower now, quieter, your words were not learned. They were remembered. The statement did not make sense. Not to her, but it sent a visible reaction through the room. One of the men, near the far wall, stiffened instantly. Another turned his head sharply, his expression tightening with something close to alarm. Emily noticed it this time. She saw the way they reacted not just to him, but to what he said, as if the words themselves carried weight. That does not make sense, she replied, shaking her head slightly. I say things like that all the time. It is not special. Lucian's gaze did not soften, but something in it shifted again. Not doubt, not disagreement. Something closer to inevitability. To you, he said. It is not. The difference in perspective settled heavily between them. Emily crossed her arms. Lightly, more out of instinct than defense, grounding herself in something physical. Then explain it to me, she said. Because right now, it just sounds like you are making something simple into something complicated. The directness of her tone would have silenced anyone else in the room. It should have. It should have drawn consequences she could not even imagine. But Lucian did not react with anger. Instead, for a brief moment, the faintest trace of something almost resembling amusement touched the corner of his expression. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but it had been there. Real. You believe the world is simple, he said. I believe the world is layered. Emily let out a small breath, shaking her head again. No, she said. I believe people make it complicated. The answer came easily, naturally, like everything else she had said to him. And once again, it landed in a way that no one else in the room could have predicted. Lucian's hand stilled against the table. Completely. Not a twitch. Not a movement. Absolute stillness. The reaction was subtle, but the effect was not. The temperature in the room dropped again, sharper this time, more sudden. A glass cracked somewhere in the distance, the sound small but unmistakable. Emily's breath caught. She had said something. Something that mattered. But she did not know what. Lucian's gaze sharpened, his eyes no longer just observing, but piercing, as if looking through her instead of at her. Say that again, he said quietly. The command was not loud. It did not need to be. Emily hesitated, her instincts warning her now, finally catching up to the pattern she had been ignoring all night. But she did not step back. She did not retreat. I said, she repeated slowly, her voice softer now, but still steady. People make things more complicated than they need to be. The silence that followed was absolute. No movement. No sound. Even the faint hum of electricity seemed to vanish. Lucian did not blink. Did not breathe. Did not move at all. And for the first time since this began, Emily felt something shift inside her. Not fear. Not exactly. Something deeper. Something that whispered that she had just stepped onto a path she could not walk back from. Because this time, the reaction was not just recognition. It was confirmation. Lucian's voice, when it came again, was quieter than anything she had heard before. That, he said slowly, is exactly what she used to say. The words landed with quiet devastation. Not in the room, not in the air, but in him. And for the first time, Emily realized that whatever connection he believed existed between them, it was not a coincidence. It was something far more dangerous. Even the coldest kings kneel for kindness. That is exactly what she used to say. The words did not fade. They lingered, heavy and irreversible, as if something long buried had just been forced back into the light. Emily felt it immediately. Not just the meaning, but the weight behind it. She did not know who he was talking about, but she knew enough to understand that whoever she was, she mattered. A lot. She. Emily repeated softly, her voice no longer as steady as before. Who is she? The question hung in the air, simple but dangerous. Around them, the reaction was instant. A sharp intake of breath from somewhere near the back. A chair scraping softly as someone shifted, uneasy. The tension in the room did not just return. It tightened. Lucian did not answer right away. His gaze moved, not away from Emily, but past her, as if looking through layers of time that no one else could see. For a brief moment, the control he had maintained all night flickered. Not broken, but strained. That is not a question you should ask. A voice cut in suddenly. It was not Lucian. The interruption came from the man who had spoken earlier, the one who had called him my lord. He had stepped forward again, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed on Emily with something far sharper than fear. Warning. Emily turned her head slightly, caught off guard by the shift. I was not asking you, she said, her voice quiet but firm. The man's expression tightened instantly, as if the response itself was an offense. You do not understand what you are interfering with, he said, his tone controlled but edged with urgency. There are matters that do not concern you. Emily frowned, her confusion deepening. He made it concern me, she replied, her gaze flicking back toward Lucian. I did not start this. The truth of that statement cut through the tension in a way that no one expected. The man opened his mouth to respond, but the words never came. Because Lucian moved. It was subtle, just a shift of his hand against the table. But the effect was immediate. Absolute silence. The man stopped speaking instantly, his body going still, as if an invisible force had pressed him into place. Lucian did not raise his voice. He did not look at him directly. You will not interrupt her again, he said. The command was quiet. Final. The man lowered his head immediately, stepping back without another word. The room followed his example. No one else dared to speak. No one else dared to interfere. Emily felt the shift again, stronger this time. Not just power. Authority that did not need to prove itself. She turned back to Lucian slowly, her heart beating faster now, but not from fear alone. You still did not answer my question, she said, her voice softer now, but steady. Lucian's gaze returned to her, and for a moment, the room seemed to disappear again, leaving only the two of them in a space that felt detached from everything else. She was someone who believed the same things you do, he said finally. That people complicate what should be simple. That kindness is not weakness. That reminding someone to eat is more important than reminding them who they are supposed to be. Each word landed with quiet precision. Emily listened, her expression softening slightly, though the confusion remained. She repeated carefully. So she is not around anymore. The statement was not a question, but it carried one within it. Lucian's expression did not change, but something in the air did. A stillness that felt heavier than before. No, he said. Just that. No explanation. No elaboration. But the weight behind it was enough. Emily looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her understanding. Not fully formed. Not complete. But enough to feel the outline of something deeper. I am not her, she said quietly. The words were not defensive. They were careful. Honest. Lucian's gaze did not waver. No, he agreed. You are not. The confirmation should have ended it. It should have restored distance, reset the boundaries that had already been crossed too many times. But it did not. Because he did not look away. He did not release the moment. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, his presence focusing again. narrowing onto her with a precision that made the rest of the world feel irrelevant. But you sound like her, he continued. You speak like her. And more importantly, you look at me the way she did. The statement settled into Emily with a quiet intensity she could not ignore. Like what? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper now. Lucian's answer came without hesitation. Like I am still someone worth reminding. The words were soft, but they carried more weight than anything else he had said. Emily felt it, deep and immediate, a pull she did not understand but could not dismiss. Around them, the room remained silent, but the tension had changed again. It was no longer just fear. It was awareness. The understanding that something far more significant than a simple interaction was unfolding. Emily took a slow breath, her thoughts racing, her instincts torn between stepping back and leaning in. I do not know anything about you, she said. So I cannot be what you think I am. Lucian studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable, his silence stretching just long enough to matter. Then, slowly, he spoke again. That, he said, is what makes this dangerous. The word did not sound like a threat. It sounded like a warning, not to her, but to everything else. And in that moment, Emily realized something she had not considered before. This was not just about him reacting to her. This was about everyone else reacting to what she had become in his presence. And she did not know if that made her safe, or something far worse. Even the coldest kings kneel for kindness. That is what makes this dangerous. The warning lingered in the air long after he said it. Not loud, not forceful, but undeniable. Emily felt it settle into her chest, heavier than anything else he had said that night. Dangerous. The word did not fit the way she saw herself. She was a waitress working double shifts, counting tips, worrying about rent. There was nothing dangerous about her life. And yet, the way the room had shifted, the way people watched her now from the corners of their eyes, told a different story. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer just part of the background. Something had changed, and everyone here understood it except her. Dangerous for who? She asked quietly, her voice steady but softer now, as if she already knew the answer would not be simple. Lucian did not respond right away. His gaze moved briefly across the room, taking in the silent figures who pretended not to be watching, the staff who stood too still, the guests who no longer touched their food. When his eyes returned to her, there was something colder there, not directed at her, directed at everything else. For anyone who forgets their place, he said. The words were calm, but they carried a weight that made several people in the room shift immediately, heads lowering, shoulders tightening. Emily felt it again, that invisible line she had crossed without knowing it existed. She looked at him carefully, her thoughts racing now, trying to catch up with what was happening around her. And what place is that? She asked. Mine, or theirs? The question landed harder than she expected, not because of how it sounded, but because of what it implied. For a moment, the entire room seemed to hold its breath again. Lucian did not look away. That, he said slowly, depends on what you choose to be. The answer did not clarify anything. It only made the ground beneath her feel less stable. Emily exhaled slowly, trying to steady herself. I did not choose any of this, she said. I was just doing my job. The simplicity of her words clashed sharply with everything that had unfolded. Lucian's expression did not change, but something in his gaze sharpened. And yet, he replied, you have already changed it. The statement was not dramatic. It was factual, and that made it harder to ignore. Emily glanced briefly around the room, seeing it now with new awareness. The distance people kept from her, the way no one approached the table, the way even her manager avoided stepping too close. She turned back to Lucian, her voice quieter now. Then change it back, she said. Tell them to stop acting like this. Tell them I am just a waitress. For the first time since this began, Lucian's gaze held something that almost resembled disagreement. Not strong, not confrontational, but present. You are not just anything, he said. The words settled heavily between them. Emily felt her pulse quicken again, not from fear, but from the weight of being seen in a way she did not understand. I was before tonight, she replied. Nothing about me has changed. Lucian leaned forward slightly, his presence focusing again, the rest of the room fading into the background. That is where you are wrong, he said quietly. You spoke to me without fear. You corrected me without hesitation. You reminded me of something I had allowed to disappear. Each statement was measured, precise. That changes everything. Emily shook her head slightly, instinctively resisting the conclusion. It should not, she said. That is normal. For you, Lucian replied. Not for this world. The distinction landed clearly now. There was a world she did not see, a set of rules she had never learned. And somehow, without knowing, she had broken them. A soft movement at the edge of her vision caught her attention. One of the servers, a young woman she had worked with for months, stood near the kitchen entrance, her eyes wide, her expression caught between fear and something else. Something like awe? When their gazes met, the woman quickly looked away, lowering her head. Emily felt a strange twist in her chest. This was wrong. All of it. She turned back to Lucian, her voice firmer now, grounded in the only thing she trusted. Then maybe your world needs to change, she said. The sentence was simple, but it cut through the tension sharper than anything else she had said. Across the room, someone exhaled sharply. Another person shifted their stance. The air tightened again, waiting. Lucian did not react immediately. His gaze remained locked on hers, unblinking, unreadable. Then, slowly, something in his expression shifted. Not anger, not rejection, something far more complex. Something that had not existed when the night began. Perhaps, he said quietly. The agreement was soft, but it carried more weight than any command he had given, because it was not forced. It was chosen. Emily felt it, the shift between them, subtle but undeniable. For the first time, it was not just him observing her. It was him considering her, and that changed everything in a way she could not yet fully understand. Around them, the room remained silent, but the nature of that silence had changed again. It was no longer just fear. It was anticipation, because everyone there could feel it. The balance had shifted, and the consequences of that shift had only just begun. Even the coldest kings kneel for kindness. Perhaps. The word did not end the moment. It opened something. Emily felt it before she understood it, a shift that moved beneath the surface of everything around them, quiet but irreversible. The balance had changed, and for the first time, it was not only because of Lucian. It was because of her. She drew in a slow breath, grounding herself, trying to hold on to something normal in a situation that refused to be normal. Then start by letting things go back to the way they were, she said, her voice steady, though softer now. People should not be afraid to breathe in a restaurant. A faint ripple moved through the room at her words, subtle but present. No one spoke. No one dared. But they heard her. Lucian's gaze did not leave her face. Fear, he said slowly, is what keeps order in place. Emily shook her head gently. No, she replied. Fear keeps people quiet. That is not the same thing. The distinction landed clean and sharp. It cut through the space between them in a way that felt almost physical. For a moment, Lucian said nothing. His expression did not change, but the silence stretched, thoughtful now, not tense. Then, slowly he turned his head. Not toward Emily. Toward the room. It was a small movement. Almost nothing. But it was enough. Continue, he said. One word. Calm. Absolute. The effect was immediate. Conversations did not burst back to life. There was no sudden noise. But movement returned. Careful at first. Measured. A chair slid quietly across the floor. A glass was lifted. A quiet voice resumed a conversation that had been frozen in place. The room breathed again. Not freely. Not yet. But enough. Emily noticed it instantly. The shift she had asked for. The change she had allowed. She looked back at him, something new settling into her expression. Not just confusion. Not just caution. Recognition. He had listened. Again. Thank you, she said, this time without prompting, the words simple and sincere. Lucian turned his gaze back to her, and for a brief moment, something in his eyes softened. Not visibly. Not in a way anyone else would notice. But she did. You are the first to thank me for not enforcing fear, he said quietly. Emily gave a small, almost uncertain smile. Maybe that means something, she replied. Lucian did not answer right away. His attention remained on her, focused, deliberate, as if each word she spoke carried more weight than it should. Then, slowly, his gaze shifted downward. Not to the table. To her hands. Emily followed his line of sight instinctively, glancing down at her own fingers. Nothing looked different. Nothing felt different. But something was. She could feel it now, faint but undeniable. A warmth beneath her skin. Subtle. Pulsing. Like something responding to attention. Her breath caught slightly. "What is that?" she asked, her voice lower now, uncertainty threading through it. Lucian did not look surprised. If anything, his expression grew more focused, more certain. "You feel it," he said. It was not a question. Emily nodded slowly, her eyes still on her hand. "Yes," she admitted. "It just started." The warmth spread slightly, not painful, but impossible to ignore. It traced along her palm, faint and fleeting, like something trying to surface but not yet fully formed. Emily lifted her hand slightly, turning it as if the answer might be visible if she looked closely enough. "Did you do this?" she asked, her gaze snapping back to him. Lucian's eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. "No," he said. The certainty in his voice left no room for doubt. Emily's confusion deepened. "Then what is happening?" The question was quieter now. Not challenging, not defensive, searching. Lucian studied her for a long moment, his silence stretching just enough to matter. Around them, the room continued its careful return to normal, but the space between them remained separate, isolated, untouched by the rest of the world. "Something old," he said finally. "Something that should not have awakened." The words settled heavily into the space between them. Emily felt the warmth in her hand pulse again, slightly stronger this time. Not painful, but deliberate. "That does not sound good," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Lucian did not disagree. He did not reassure her. His gaze remained locked on hers, the weight of centuries hidden just beneath the surface. "It is not," he said quietly. The honesty in his tone sent a chill down her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. Emily lowered her hand slowly, her thoughts racing now, trying to connect something that refused to make sense. "You said I reminded you of someone," she said. "Is this because of her?" Lucian did not answer immediately. His expression did not change, but something in his eyes shifted. Not uncertainty, not hesitation, recognition. "Yes," he said. One word. Final. The warmth in her hand pulsed again, stronger this time, and for a brief moment, Emily thought she saw something beneath her skin. A faint shape, gone before she could focus on it. Her breath caught. "What was she?" Emily asked, her voice unsteady now, the question no longer casual, no longer curious, but necessary. Lucian leaned forward slightly, his presence narrowing once more, the rest of the world fading away again as if it had never existed. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than before, but heavier. "She was the reason kingdoms fell," he said. The words landed like a distant storm, quiet but devastating. Emily stared at him, her heart beginning to pound, not from fear alone, but from the realization that whatever was happening to her, whatever had awakened inside her, it was not small. It was not simple, and it was not safe. Even the coldest kings kneel for kindness. She was the reason kingdoms fell. The words did not sound exaggerated. They did not feel like a story meant to impress or intimidate. They felt like truth. Heavy. Final. Emily stood completely still, her hand lowering slowly to her side, though the warmth beneath her skin did not fade. It pulsed again, deeper now, as if reacting not just to him, but to what he had said. Kingdoms. Fell. Her mind struggled to connect those words to anything real, anything grounded in the life she knew. Rent due at the end of the week. Tips counted at the end of a shift. A small apartment with a flickering light in the kitchen. None of that belonged in the same sentence as what he had just described. "That does not make sense," she said quietly, though her voice carried less certainty now than it had before. Lucian did not argue. He did not correct her. He simply watched her, as if waiting for her to catch up to something that had already begun. "It does not have to make sense yet," he said. The calm in his voice made it worse. Emily shook her head slightly, trying to push back against the feeling building inside her chest. "No," she said. "It has to make sense now, because whatever is happening to me is not normal." The word normal sounded weak the moment she said it. It did not belong here anymore. Not after everything she had seen. Not after everything she had felt. The warmth in her hand flared again, sharper this time, and Emily gasped softly, instinctively lifting her hand again. This time, she saw it clearly. Not just a feeling. A mark. Faint. Golden. It traced along the center of her palm, intricate and shifting, like something alive just beneath the surface of her skin. Her breath caught. "That was not there before," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Around them, the room reacted instantly. Not loudly, not openly, but the change was unmistakable. One of the men near the back stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor before he forced himself still again. Another turned completely away, as if refusing to look at what was unfolding. The manager stepped back, his face pale, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to remain composed. Emily saw none of it. Her focus was entirely on her hand, on the mark that should not exist. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling now despite her effort to stay steady. Lucian's gaze dropped to her palm, his expression tightening for the first time. Not fear, not panic, recognition. "It is a seal," he said quietly. The word did not comfort her. It made everything worse. "A seal for what?" she pressed, her eyes lifting back to his. Lucian did not answer immediately. His silence stretched longer this time, heavy with something he was choosing not to say. That alone told her enough. "You know," she said, her voice firmer now, though the fear had begun to settle in beneath it. "You know what this is." Lucian's gaze returned to her face, steady and unyielding. "Yes," he said. One word. No hesitation. Emily felt her pulse spike. "Then tell me," she demanded softly, her voice tight now, caught between fear and the need for answers. The room seemed to lean in again, listening without sound. Lucian studied her for a long moment, as if measuring something beyond the question itself. Then, slowly he spoke. "It is a binding mark," he said. "One that does not appear without reason." The explanation did not help. It only deepened the uncertainty. "Binding me to what?" Emily asked. Lucian's gaze did not waver. "To a past that was never meant to return," he replied. The words landed with a quiet finality that sent a chill through her entire body. Emily stared at him, her thoughts racing, trying to grasp something that refused to settle into logic. "I do not have a past like that," she said. "I am not who you think I am." Lucian did not argue. He did not contradict her. But he did not agree either. "You are not who you think you are," he said instead. The shift in the statement was subtle, but it changed everything. Emily felt it immediately, the ground beneath her certainty cracking just enough to matter. "No," she said, shaking her head again, her voice unsteady now. "No, that is not how this works." The warmth in her palm pulsed again, stronger than before, and this time, the mark did not fade completely. It lingered, faint but visible, like a shadow that refused to disappear. Emily lowered her hand slowly, her breathing uneven now, her mind caught between denial and the undeniable proof in front of her. "You said she is gone," she said quietly. "So whatever this is, it cannot be her." Lucian's gaze held hers, and for the first time, there was something in his expression that had not been there before. Not certainty, not control, something far more dangerous. "Hope." "No," he said softly. "It cannot." The agreement should have reassured her. It did not. Because the way he said it made it sound like he wanted to be wrong. Emily felt the shift inside her again, deeper this time, something pulling at the edges of her awareness, something old and unfamiliar pressing against the life she knew. And for the first time, she realized something she had not considered before. This was not just something happening to her. This was something waking up. And if what he said was true, then whatever it was, it had already changed the course of everything. Even the coldest kings kneel for kindness. This was not just something waking up. It was something choosing to be seen. Emily could feel it now, not only in her hand, but deeper, beneath her thoughts, beneath her memories, like a quiet presence that did not belong to the life she remembered. The golden mark on her palm had not faded. It remained faint, but alive, its lines shifting ever so slightly, as if responding to something she could not hear. Her breathing slowed, not because she was calm, but because something inside her demanded stillness. Around her, the restaurant continued its fragile imitation of normal, but the illusion no longer held any meaning. She could feel the distance now, not just physical space, but separation. She was no longer part of them, and they knew it. Lucian did not move. His gaze remained fixed on her, not with control this time, but with a focus that felt almost protective, though he had not said the word. "It is reacting to you," Emily said quietly, more to herself than to him. The realization came slowly, piece by piece, settling into place with a certainty she could not ignore. "Not to the room. Not to them. To me." Lucian gave a slight nod. "Yes." The confirmation did not comfort her. It narrowed everything. Then it is not something that just appeared, she continued, her voice steadier now, her thoughts beginning to align despite the fear beneath them. It was already there. Lucian's eyes darkened slightly, not in disagreement, but in recognition of the path her mind was taking. Hidden, he said. Dormant. The words felt too precise to be guesses. Emily looked down at her hand again, studying the faint golden lines that traced her skin. For how long? She asked. Lucian did not answer immediately. His silence stretched, heavy with something he was choosing not to say again. That was answer enough. Emily exhaled slowly. Long enough that I should have known, she said quietly. But I did not. The admission settled between them. Not weak. Not defeated. Honest. Lucian's voice, when it came again, was softer than before. You were not meant to know. The statement carried weight, but not authority. Not control. Something else. Regret. Emily looked up at him sharply. By who? The question came faster this time, more direct, cutting through the uncertainty that had held her back before. Lucian's gaze held hers, steady, but this time there was something else beneath it. Conflict. By those who understood what you are, he said. The answer was careful, measured, and incomplete. Emily felt it immediately. And what is that? She asked, her voice quiet but firm. Lucian did not respond right away. His eyes flicked, briefly to her hand again, to the mark that had begun to define the moment, then back to her face. Someone who should not exist in this time, he said finally. The words landed deeper than anything else he had said. Emily felt it, not just as information, but as something that pressed against the edges of her identity. She shook her head slightly, instinctively rejecting it. That is not possible, she said. I have a life. I have memories. I know who I am. Lucian did not contradict her. He did not dismiss her words. And yet, he said quietly, your body remembers something your mind does not. The distinction cut clean. Emily felt it immediately. The truth in it. The conflict between what she knew and what she was beginning to feel. She closed her hand slowly, the mark dimming slightly beneath her skin but not disappearing. Then this is not just about you recognizing me, she said. This is about something in me recognizing you. Lucian's gaze sharpened, just slightly. Yes. The confirmation came without hesitation. Emily felt a strange stillness settle over her, not calm, but clarity. The pieces did not fully connect yet, but the shape of something larger had begun to form. And if this continues, she said slowly, choosing each word with care, what happens? The question was no longer casual. It was necessary. Lucian did not look away. Then the past does not stay buried, he said. The words were simple. The implication was not. Emily swallowed, her throat dry now despite everything. And that is a problem, she said. Lucian's expression did not change. For most, he replied. Emily studied him for a long moment, something shifting again in her understanding. But not for you, she said. It was not an accusation. It was observation. Lucian did not deny it. He did not confirm it either. But the silence was enough. Emily exhaled slowly, her thoughts settling into something steadier now, even as the situation grew more complex. You said she changed everything, she said. That she made kingdoms fall. Lucian's gaze held hers, unwavering. Yes. Emily's voice softened slightly. And you are not afraid that this will happen again? The question lingered, quiet but sharp. Lucian leaned forward just slightly, his presence focusing once more, but this time there was no pressure behind it. Only certainty. I am not afraid. Of what she was, he said. Emily felt the shift in his tone immediately. Subtle, but unmistakable. Then what are you afraid of? She asked. Lucian's answer came without hesitation. What she chose to become. The words settled into her like a shadow. Not threatening. Not immediate. But inevitable. Emily looked down at her hand one last time. The faint glow beneath her skin pulsing once, softly, as if responding to the truth of what had been said. And in that quiet moment, she understood something she could no longer ignore. This was not just about discovering who she had been. This was about deciding who she would be next. Even the coldest kings kneel for kindness. The faint glow beneath her skin pulsed one last time, then steadied. Not fading, not spreading, balanced. As if whatever had awakened inside Emily Carter had reached a point of decision. She stood there in the quiet center of a room that no longer felt like a restaurant, her hand slowly lowering to her side, her breathing even, her thoughts no longer racing. For the first time since this began, she was not reacting. She was choosing. Lucian watched her without interruption. No command. No pressure. Only attention. Waiting. The power in the room had not diminished, but it had shifted. It no longer pressed against her. It circled her. Acknowledged her. Emily lifted her gaze to meet his, steady now, grounded in something she had not felt before. Not fear. Not confusion. Clarity. You said she made kingdoms fall, she said quietly. Not because she had to. Because she chose to. Lucian did not speak. He did not need to. The truth of it was already there. Emily nodded once, as if confirming something to herself. Then this is not about what I was, she continued. It is about what I decide to do with it. The words settled cleanly between them, and this time, nothing in the room resisted them. Because they were not disruptive. They were final. Lucian's gaze sharpened slightly, not in opposition, but in recognition. Yes, he said. One word. Agreement. Not control. Emily exhaled slowly, the last trace of uncertainty leaving her shoulders. She glanced briefly around the room, seeing it clearly now. The distance. The fear. The careful movements. This world he had spoken about. A world built on silence and control and unspoken rules. Then, she looked back at him. Then I am not going to become what she was, she said. The statement was calm, certain, and completely her own. The reaction was immediate, though no one spoke. A shift moved through the room, like a held breath finally released. Lucian did not move, but something in his expression changed. Not disappointment. Not relief. Something deeper. Understanding. And what will you become? He asked quietly. The question carried weight, but not expectation. Emily did not answer right away. She turned slightly, reaching for the plate he had barely touched before this night began. With a small, deliberate movement, she adjusted it again, aligning it properly in front of him. The same simple gesture that had started everything. Then she looked back at him, her expression steady, grounded in the life she knew, not the past he feared. Someone who reminds you to eat, she said. The simplicity of it cut through everything else. The history, the power, the fear. Lucian's gaze held hers, and for the first time, there was no distance in it. No centuries. No weight of kingdoms lost. Only the present moment. He reached for the fork again, not because he was told, not because he was commanded, but because he chose to. Another bite. This time, there was no ripple of fear in the room. Only quiet acceptance. The world had adjusted. Not to him. To her. Emily allowed herself a small breath, the tension leaving her completely now. The mark on her hand remained, faint and warm, but no longer pressing. No longer demanding. It was not controlling her. It was waiting for her. And she had answered. Lucian set the fork down slowly, his gaze never leaving her. Then you have already changed more than she ever did, he said quietly. Emily tilted her head slightly, a hint of softness returning to her expression. No, she replied. I just did not forget something simple. The words lingered between them, quiet and absolute. Around them, the restaurant returned fully to life. Conversations resuming, movement flowing naturally, the tension dissolving into something almost normal. But nothing was the same. It never would be. Because in a single moment, a waitress had stood in front of a king and chosen not to become a legend of fear, but something far rarer. A reminder. And that was enough. Even the coldest kings. Kneel for kindness.